What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a new film coming to the horror streaming service Shudder on August 23rd, and that film is called Hellhole. Directed by John Adams and Toby Poser, this film is also written by them alongside Lulu Adams, and also stars John Adams and Toby Poser alongside people like Maximum Portman, Peter Arsic, and more. Ah man, it has been quite some time since I've seen a film that I flat out did not like. And you guys know, if you follow this channel, that I like to lean into plenty of positives, even for movies that I'm not crazy about. I like to celebrate the things that work in any film, and I love the idea of people being able to make films. It's not an easy art form to create something magical in, so when you see something that really works, it's just absolute talent on display, a lot of hard work. And when even it comes down to movies that maybe don't work for you, there's usually plenty of things you can still take away from when it comes from the filmmaking. This film is directed by John Adams, as I mentioned, as well as I believe his wife Toby Poser, and they are known as the Adams family. Of course, not that Adams family, but an Adams family that exists. And I actually reviewed one of their films in the past called Hellbender that also came out on Shudder, and I was not a fan of that film. And only a few days after having done that review, Chris Stuckman actually reviewed Hellbender and actually gave it a really good review, which I was just like, I guess I'm on the opposite side of the fence here. Now, I learned in his review though a little bit more about the Adams family and the fact that they are a small knit filmmaking family that make these movies on their own for the most part, pretty low budget, and on that level I can appreciate it. As a fan of film and a fan of people just, getting together and making a movie, writing a script, getting whoever they can to be involved with it and making it themselves on a low budget, that's admirable. I can always appreciate that, and I think that is something that I have had, in hindsight, a more appreciation for when it comes down to the film Hellbender. But here we are now talking about the latest installment coming from them, and yeah, I mean, similar to Hellbender, I was just not a fan of this film. As I mentioned, it's going to be hitting the horror streaming service Shudder on August 23rd, and the kind folks over at Shudder sent me over an early screener to check it out a little bit early. And going into it, the poster looked really cool, and the base premise of the film at the beginning seemed pretty intriguing. I'm also a fan of lower budget horror films. I've reviewed plenty here on the channel and had plenty of positive to say about many of those films, and a lot of times when I know it is a lower budget film, I can go into it with a different set of eyes than I would a big studio production. But when it comes down to it at its core, I think any film that you watch, you want to have connect with you in some way, or have something that has some sort of memorable entertainment value to it. And unfortunately, I can start this off by saying that Hellhole for me was a hard watch. It was a slog to get through. It felt like a chore to watch. I wasn't a big fan of the performances throughout the course of the film, nor was I really a big fan of the meandering narrative that plays out throughout the course of the film. None of the characters were ever all that interesting to me, and while I can appreciate that a lot of the effects were made on a lower budget and that there were some solid uses of practical effects and some digital effects, I think for the most part the effects come off incredibly cheesy, and the film's tone oftentimes was clashing with me, with there being moments where it felt like it was trying to be serious and other moments where it felt like it was trying to be kind of a little bit more cheesy and have a little bit more of a comedic stamp on what they're trying to do, but I never truly felt that comedic stamp. So it oftentimes kind of felt like this movie was just a little bit mismatched with its overall tone, look, feel, vibe, performances, and everything else that this film includes. The base premise of this film is we're following a group of oil diggers who are now at this place where they're going to dig down into the ground to try to find oil. And while they're doing that, they end up uncovering a man who's actually down there in some sort of cocoon goo kind of substance, only for them to find out he's still alive, this man who's been in the ground for hundreds of years at this point. And not too long into uncovering this man, they realize that there's a reason he's been kept alive, and that reason is that he has some sort of parasitic creature that's living inside of him. And of course, this starts off our horror movie, and they have to find out a way to survive this creature and not let it spread to other living beings. And that's the base premise of the film. I'm not going to give you guys much spoilers. I don't want to say too much, of course, as the film has yet to come out as of filming and uploading this review. But what I can start this off by saying is that I think the premise is interesting, right? You have a pretty solid kind of secluded location here. These characters are off on an oil site. They're there for work. I forgot to mention, but they're also kind of trapped off because there was some rain that happened, so the river is kind of taken over the road, so they can't leave this area. So you have a secluded, locked in location. You have a group of individuals who are now stuck here with some sort of parasitic alien-like creature. They've uncovered some dead body, or some body from hundreds of years ago that should be dead but is actually still alive and is being kept alive by this creature, and now they're trapped there with this creature that just wants to essentially swap bodies and kill them. And it seems like a solid premise. And, you know, again, I can appreciate the fact that this was made by a smaller team and a lower budget, so my mind instantly is a little bit more forgiving of things like digital effects and even practical effects, and I can always appreciate a good campy horror film, so I was on board for all that. But as the movie played out, I ultimately, 30 or 40 minutes in, just found myself completely bored with the film. And I sat through the whole thing, of course, as I love to be able to take an entire movie. I always like to give a movie a chance and recognize that in the last act, a movie can buy me over or win me over. You know, there's been so many times that I've watched a film that I'm enjoying on the first half, only for it to kind of let me down in the later part of the film, or vice versa, films that I have absolutely not been a fan of, only to have me won over by the time I'm coming to the end and have a far more positive outlook on the film. And just throughout the entirety of this film, my interest just consistently got lower and lower and lower as the entirety of the film played out. And I think it really just comes down to its meandering narrative. A lot of the film just kind of takes place in the same locations, saying the same things, doing the same things. And I think what made it worse was a lot of the dialogue. The film is trying to be overly scientific at points because there are scientists who are also involved with this oil digging team, and they're trying to find out what this creature is. They're trying to collect samples, and a lot of the dialogue just feels so mismatched to the actors that they chose. More often than not, majority of the performances in this film are pretty weak. There's a handful of individuals in this film that I do think give at least solid or enjoyable enough performances, but unfortunately they're overshadowed by the fact that there are so many other cast members in this film that don't really feel like they've acted before. And maybe that's not their fault 100%, and maybe that has a little bit more to do with the direction of the film. But there are certain people in here, including the scientist characters in this film, that are absolutely terrible when it came down to the acting. You know, no shade to the people individually. I don't know if they've been better in other things, depending on what the script was in those other things. But when it comes down to this movie, I just never found myself connected to any of the characters or the performances, which just made it a hard watch. You know, you have a solid premise, but it never felt like the film ever really did anything with it. It felt like we were just kind of regurgitating the same things over and over again until we get to an end that ultimately was fairly lackluster. It came to an end, the credits started rolling, and I could not have cared less about the outcome of this film or any of the characters, their journey, who died, who didn't die, who survived, who was cool in the film, who was funny in the film. None of that really ever did anything for me because the film just kind of felt just not great, just very bland and just forgettable and boring. And I just wish I had more to say on the film. I wish there was themes I could tackle. If you guys have been watching this channel, I love to break down film and characters, thematic elements, talk about the cinematography and all these different things. But outside of the fact that the film was followable, you can watch the film and at least know what's happening, you're not lost. It just never felt exciting. It felt uneventful, and when it is eventful, it just never does anything when it comes down to what's on paper, on the script, to ever fully invest you. Add in the bad performers, and you just ultimately have a wildly forgettable film here. And I would say that I like this one less than Hellbender. I think I liked Hellbender more. But I can genuinely say that the Addams Family productions seem to really not be for me. I can really appreciate, again, a lower budget horror like films being made, especially by a family unit that is able to make these films on their own. Something about that is wildly admirable, but I just wish that they created movies or stories and had characters that were engaging and fun to watch and exciting and kind of had you at least into what was going on. But by the time we get to the end of this film, I didn't give a damn about a single person in this film, a single element of this film. And it's crazy because Shudder has had some pretty big wins in the last couple years with some of the films they've released in, theaters and some of the bigger ones that have kind of created some buzz for them. But they still tend to have these original films that come to their platform that are just stinkers, man. Like, I've seen some of the worst horror films I've ever seen on Shudder, while on the flip side, they've also released some of the most inventive horror films I've ever seen as well. I mean, if anything, I can appreciate the mixed bag and how there's a little bit of something for everybody. But man, it always blows my mind when I see a Shudder original like this that ultimately is just so weak to me that I could never even fathom watching this film again, nor could I ever fathom telling somebody to watch this film again. Overall, when it comes down to Hellhole, there's a fun premise there at the core of the film, but it's just way down. It's weighed down by all of the other technical elements that just make a film what they are. This is not a film I could see myself revisiting ever, nor is it a film that I could see myself being recommended even by other horror fans that I know love horror. I'm sure this film, like Hellbender, will find its audience. I'm sure people, maybe even like Chris Duckman, might really appreciate a lot that this film does. Again, I think it's incredibly admirable what this family's been able to do. but I ultimately just want to be able to watch one of their movies and feel like I'm actually engaged in the narrative, that I'm gripped to what's going on, instead of just having that part of my filmmaking mind that's like, wow, well, I can appreciate all this hard work that went into this, even though I'm absolutely not enjoying it. You know, I gotta be real and true to who I am. And I just think that there was not much on the filmmaking side of this movie or the performance or any of that ever gripped me and created a film that is memorable to even talk about. This has easily become one of my least favorite films of 2024, and I genuinely wish I had more to say, but I'm definitely curious to hear what all of you guys have to say. Are you coming to this review after you saw it on Shudder and you just are curious to see if somebody else agrees with your opinion? Let me know down below. Did you like this movie, Hellhole? Did you not like it? Whatever the case may be, let me know. Or are you watching this before the movie comes out? Is this something that's been on your radar? Are you a fan of the Addams Family Productions? Whatever the case may be, let me know down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.